We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live Fridays at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.
So you think that you can tell us how to live our lives, never questioning the source from which your moral code derives. You think that suffering is part of some great plan that's been devised. I wonder, what will it take for you to start opening your eyes? I wonder.
Hello and welcome to the Atheist Experience. Today is the 17th of April, also known as Lich King Day. I am your host, Jim Barrows, and joining me today is Forrest Valkai. How you doing, Forrest?
Hello. I'm awesome, man. Thanks so much for having me.
We've been looking forward to it for over a month now since we got you scheduled, so this is really kind of cool. So for everybody who doesn't know who you are, you want to give us a brief introduction?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name's Forrest. I'm a biologist and I teach science on the internets. I teach people to love science and themselves. I mainly talk about evolution because that's kind of my specialty. I study evolutionary biology and bioanthropology. So I study the biology of humans and where we came from and all sorts of cool things. But I also touch on all sorts of other things, including religious topics. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the universe and yourself, check me out on the YouTube and the TikTok and anywhere fine video entertainment is enjoyed.
All righty. Well, the Atheist Experience is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 organization dedicated to the promotion of positive atheist culture and the separation of religion and government. So, we ready for the first call?
Whenever you are.
All righty. So, first up is Alex. How you doing?
Hey, Alex.
Hi, how are you?
Doing good.
Hi.
Never had a bad day.
So it says here something about lucid dreaming providing an explanation for out-of-body experiences.
Right. So do I need to first briefly explain what lucid dreaming is, or can I just
keep it really, really brief for viewers who may not know?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So lucid dreaming is the process of becoming aware and gaining control in your dreams. And this is an experience that can basically feel like you are in a different reality. It can feel like that, but we know that that's something that the brain does. Now, proponents of religion often propose near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences that they report as evidence for the afterlife and their religion being true. And what I'm saying is that I found out that there's a method for lucid dreaming that actually gets you to before going to the dream state, you actually there's a method where you are falling asleep, and as you are falling asleep, you are going through this where you are feeling something very, very similar to what happens in out-of-body experiences. And so before you are transcending to the dream state. So that's evidence that this is something like the out-of-body experiences are something that the brain does. That's good evidence against the what proponents of religion claim.
So you're saying that because we can control dreaming, that someone who's having an out-of-body experience, quote, quote, is actually just having a profound dream and they're kind of supplanting in their expectations of what that would look like. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, basically it's kind of evidence that that the out-of-body experiences that they report is something that is equivalent to a dream state, because a lucid dreaming method actually gets there.
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable. And there are other things that will cause your brain to do this as well. One of the most famous chemicals that people like to talk about is dimethyltryptamine, or DMT. And that's something that you can actually extract from like ayahuasca plants, for example, and people use it recreationally. And what's really cool about it is that you will have profound, extreme hallucinations that can last for what seems like hours, even days, when really you're tripping out for about 15 minutes. And so people who take DMT recreationally, they'll lie on the floor with their eyes wide open for 5 solid seconds. They'll come back and like, I've just spent this past 6 years in this other dimension exploring the cosmos and everything, when really this is just, this crazy chemical. And the cool thing about this is that this is something that's naturally in your brain all the time. And it's one of those things that when your brain is starved of oxygen, when you're dying, is dumped into your brain. So there's this idea that in the instant that you die, you actually experience, however many days, weeks, months of extreme weirdness and in this beautiful state. And so, yeah, these types of things are absolutely explanations for out-of-body experiences, for near-death experiences. The usual question, when you talk about Occam's razor, if you hear hoofbeats, do you think horses or zebras first? When you hear someone say, I was in the room floating around, I saw the doctors working on my body, I saw my family, I saw a tunnel, I saw a bright light, is this the fact that your specific religion is true and that everything that you've been taught as a kid is actually what the reality is, and it just so happens to be the exact same for everybody else who ever experienced it? Or if a brain is starving of oxygen, does it behave this way? Which one makes more sense,
Exactly. I also read somewhere that that DMT, like I know a bit about DMT and that it's a drug that can be found in nature. I also know that DMT is also it gets released in the brain during dreams, like during when the brain starts to dream. And
I'm not 100% on that, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, I'm pretty sure about that. But I also read something that DMT has also been found in the brains of people who were on their deathbed, basically. Yeah. So that's another good piece of evidence, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just one more reason why when we hear these fantastical claims, there is always a naturalistic explanation. It's not boring. It's not mundane. It's fascinating. It's beautiful. It's just not magic,
Exactly.
All right, Alex, anything else for us?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
All right. Well,
thanks so much for calling us, man. That was a thought-provoking thing to bring up. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Have a good one.
All right. Thank you for taking my call.
Absolutely.
All right.
What a nice guy.
Yeah. If you guys like what we do and would like to support us, here are some ways to support the Atheist Experience and the ACA. You can become a member for as little as 99 cents a month. Click the join button below the video. This will give you access to special chat emojis. The Atheist Experience is just one of the shows put on by the ACA. Make sure to check out our other shows as well. Secular Sexuality on Thursdays starting at 7 p.m. Central. Truth Wanted airs live Fridays at 7. And then we have our Sunday shows. Talk Heathen airs at 1 p.m. Central, and the Nonprofits is on right before this show at 3 p.m. Central. And you can support us on Patreon at tiny.cc/PatreonAXP. That's PatreonAXP. All right, we ready for this next call? Let's see.
By all means,
here.
Bring them on.
All right.
Maybe this will be a unique episode and they'll all be that pleasant. It'll be great.
Yes, that would be nice. All right. Next up is Nate in California. How you doing, Nate?
Hello, Nate.
Hey guys, how are you?
Hello. There.
Oh, there he is. Hey.
Hello.
Good.
Can you hear me at all or no?
Yeah, sure can.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Fantastic. So, Jim, I know you're one of the hosts. Who's the other person? I'm sorry, I didn't quite look that
Forrest.
up. I didn't
Hi, my name's Forrest.
And I was strange. Forrest, good to meet
My-
you.
yeah.
So my question really is, really quickly, is from a standpoint of being, I'm an atheist, right? So as far as a theist God is concerned, it's pretty straightforward, right? To say that, hey, there isn't, a theist God is by definition intervening and stuff like that. So, but so far we haven't seen any evidence for one that is empirical.
Mhm.
So we don't have a reason to believe in a theist God, right? So
Yeah.
that's very clear. That's out of the way. But my question really was about a deist God, right? So when you talk about a deist God, technically this God is someone who sits outside the microwave, right? Pushes the button, and everything inside the microwave, the universe, unfolds. So for organisms inside the microwave, there is no way to know what's happened on the outside. I mean, the deist God doesn't intervene, right? Technically, from what I understand. Given that, is it a valid stand to have to say that, hey, I sit right in the middle, 50% agnostic, to say that I believe as much as I don't in a deist God, right in the middle. Is that a valid stand to take, or
Well,
am I having some kind of a brain slip? I'm not able to think this through.
It's a true false proposition. And so it depends on what you mean by 50-50. Some people might define 50-50 as being, I don't know enough to make a decision. It could go either way. In which case, I don't know is a perfectly valid stance to take on any proposition. When the proposition is either true or false, there's either a deist type God or there isn't. I don't know how you can be 50-50 on that. I mean, you can be, I don't know, but, or I don't care. But I don't know what 50-50 means in that case, right? To say that, because the proposition is either true and you accept it, or the proposition is false and you reject it, or you don't know, or you just don't have enough information to make a decision. So those are the three normal positions to take on any stance. So what do you mean by 50%?
Yes. So by 50%, what I mean is to say that, let's say on a scale of 1 to 7, right, on the Dawkins kind of a scale. On a theist God, you can always go up to a 6 to say, or more to say, hey, I'm a non-believer, because there's no evidence. But when it comes to a deist God, does it make sense to say, I'm a 4, right? Because I can not, there's no way I'm ever going to get evidence for a deist God, even if there was one, because technically that God doesn't have anything to do with the world that's unfolding once he kicked it off, right? So there's no way for me to know at all. So
yeah,
should I be
my
4,
biggest thing
or
about
should I be
that,
on a 1 or a 6? Yeah, that's my.
I would say personally, I wouldn't even give it a number for the same reason that when you talk about like what happened before the Big Bang, something like that, right? You're asking what happened before time started. You're asking what happened before the concept of before meant anything. That question makes no sense. It isn't even, you're not allowed to ask it almost. You know what I mean? It's a meaningless thing. It's like asking, what does purple smell like? It's just, what does that even mean? So I see that the same way. You talk about someone standing outside the microwave and pushing the button. By the way, love that analogy. Never heard that before. That's fantastic. You would have to then not only say that there is such a thing as before time, as outside of the universe, as whatever, but that you have a way to measure that and tell that that's a thing. And even if you want to say, well, I can't know either direction, I can't know if it is or it isn't, so therefore I kind of have this neutral in between position, you then have to justify the fact that you're talking about a claim that's unfalsifiable. When you hear people talk about whether or not we're living in a simulation, for example, I could give you proof positive that we are not living in a simulation. If I could somehow produce something that could show you beyond a shadow of a doubt that we are not in a video game right now, you could then turn around and say, yeah, that's part of the game. That's part of the simulation. That's coded in. If you were to wake up from the simulation like Neo and all of a sudden discover that your whole life was as part of this computer program, then you would say, okay, I have just woken up into the next part of the simulation. That was one chapter, one level, and now I'm in level 2, you know? So like, this is an unfalsifiable thing. It's something that you could never prove right or wrong. There's no amount of evidence in any way that would ever work. So it's really just not worth thinking about or bothering yourself with. There's no reason to give yourself a rating on this scale, because the scale is nonsensical by itself with this question.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. It definitely does. And I am, I was thinking, I'm thinking more a little bit, probably not as refined as you are, but more or less like what you are. The only submission I had there was to say that I know that the deist God, like you, the way you put it is to say this is something that precedes time itself in some sense, right? So there's no way for you to know at all. And I am all the way there with you in that part. But because that is the case, what I'm also thinking is pushing it a little bit further and saying, I will never, ever, or no one can never, ever know if there is a deist God at all or not. Doesn't mean there isn't one, doesn't mean there is one, right?
Yeah.
So you just don't know. And I mean, a fair position to take there would say, I just don't know, of course, which means it could be anything. It could be yes or no. It's as good as a coin toss.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that, well, then that also the next thing I would ask you is like, what my whole point there was like kind of not bothering with it, but you're right. You could never know. In the same way, if I told you I have an elephant behind these bookshelves, you'll never know if that's true. Mm-hmm. And you're the question you could say the positions you could take is yes, there is, or no, there isn't. And both of those require evidence. Or you could say, as you just did, I don't know. The question is, how much stock are you going to put in that? How much of your life is going to be based around that? Are you going to introduce yourself to people saying, you know, my name's whatever, and I do this for a living, and also I'm pretty sure there's not an elephant, but I'm not really sure. Or are you just going to ignore that entirely and not put any stock in it whatsoever? So like, I would just ask you, why would you care about that any more than anything else that I could possibly present to you, you know?
That's a really nice argument. I mean, it doesn't impact my life or anyone else's in any way at all. So
exactly.
Why bother so much about it?
It's interesting. It's intellectually honest to say I don't know, but then that's where the conversation should lose all importance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, guys. No, cool. I was trying to validate the veracity of how I'm thinking. Because you guys do the thinking, right? You guys do it for I don't know for a living or not, but you guys do it much more than I do. I do something else. So yeah, but thank you for your opinion. That's helpful.
Thank you so much for asking, Nate. It was an awesome question. Thank you so much for bringing it up.
Yep.
All right. Have a good day.
Goodbye. Yep.
Cheers.
All right. So for those of you who don't know, we now have a channel that houses all the shows of the ACA in audio podcast form. Visit tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. There you can listen to all the latest shows from the Atheist Experience, Talk, Heathen, Truth, Wanted, Secular Sexuality, the Nonprofits, and others, all on one channel. We also have 3 Facebook groups that are run by fans for fans that you can interact with. The first is the Atheist Experience fan group at tiny.cc/FBAXP. There's also the Atheist Experience private fan group where you can interact with others without having those interactions appear on your public feed at tiny.cc/FBAXPPR. We also have a new group, the Atheist Experience fan group, Atheist versus Theist Debates, where you can try out some of your arguments on theists and atheists alike. You can find that at tiny.cc/AXP fan debates. That's tiny.cc/AXP fan debates. All right, going on to the next call. And, there we are. Let's talk to Brett in Missouri. How's it going, Brett?
Hey, Brett.
Hey, how you doing?
Not too bad. Says here that you want to talk about, is atheism objective or subjective?
Well, there's that, and I got some other questions if you guys got the time.
All right, well, shoot.
Well, the first question would be what you just mentioned. Do you believe that atheism is subjective or objective?
Well, I would say that it's skeptical, and so it tends to be more objective than not.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's
Or
a
objective
position
does
on a
not
question
have
about
it.
objective reality.
Yeah, would you say that atheism is could be associated with objective reality, or is it just simply a subjective opinion of yours that there's no God?
It's a position on an objective question. So the question is, does a God exist? And we're saying, prove it. And until then, I'm not holding my breath. Like we just talked about with the last caller, if I say there's an elephant back behind this bookshelf, the answers are yes, no, or I don't believe you. If I say yes or no, I have to back it up with evidence. I don't believe you isn't necessarily the same thing as no. It just means until you show me a reason to trust you, I'm not going to buy it. And so it is an objective point. It's a position on objective reality. I don't know if calling a belief objective tracks in my brain that way, but to go for what you're saying here, I would say objective makes the most sense.
Yep.
All right, fair enough. My next question would be more of a science question. How would you explain in a naturalistic worldview with evolution how pain receptors came into existence?
They're just a type of nerve. So like you have all sorts of different kinds of nerves all over your body that send the exact same kind of signal. It's just an electrochemical signal up to your brain. The action potentials work the same way. It's just different chemicals in different directions. And so you have thermoreceptors for feeling heat. You have mechanoreceptors that feel pressure and deformation of cells. Nociception is the perception of pain when these things are experiencing damage to your cells. And so it's just a signal to your brain telling you, hey, there's a problem. And there's lots of different ways that works. There's lots of different cool ways that's evolved and lots of different cool pathways for it. But honestly, it's just another nerve doing the same thing that nerves do. So it's not anything boring. It's just not magic.
Yeah, I understand how pain receptors work. I'm just asking, not the horse, but the carriage here. Why did the pain receptors come into existence in the first place? You believe we originally started out as a self-replicating cell, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We still are self-replicating cells. We're just a bunch of them now.
The short answer is you have to have some way to avoid things. Well, you have to have some way to avoid things that are going to hurt you and to find things that are going to keep you alive. And what we describe as pain is generally our body's going, hey, this is not a good place to be or a good thing to be doing, so stop doing it. And so you need that kind of a feedback system, right? And that's all pain really is a feedback system to the organism that says, hey, stop doing that or run away.
I think to even build on that further, just as an example
you're saying that we need this to happen, but evolution doesn't have a consciousness. It doesn't care if we die or suffer or go through the worst extremity. Why would it?
No, but evolution is based on natural selection, and natural selection works by the simple principle of if you do X, you die. If you don't do Y, you die. And so the ones that don't do X and do Y tend to live and pass on the genes. So the ones that had the alleles for working on this properly, this is basic, neo-Darwinianism. This is not the complex, exciting, details, but like basic neo-Darwinian evolution. It's just if you have the alleles that give you the advantage, you survive and you have more offspring that also have those alleles. And if you don't have the right alleles, you die and you don't pass on those have more offspring this way. So we're talking about anything from nociception to eyesight to the ability to see a specific color or smell a specific smell, whatever it is. If this gives you a survival advantage, you're going to have more offspring than the ones that don't do this. Chordates are, if I remember correctly, like 500 something million years old. I'm pulling that off the top of my head. I don't remember. Someone will correct me, I'm sure. But to have that spinal cord in the first place is a relatively new thing. And then to have, nerves functioning in this way is just building off of that system that was already there, because evolution, remember, is not an inventor, it's a tinkerer. So we just take these cells that are already there and make something better out of it. So it would work the exact same way as anything else ever would evolve. If it gives you an advantage, then you live. And pulling your hand off of the stove when it's hot, that absolutely is an advantage. And to play off what Jeff was saying, what Jim was saying just a second ago, also, it's important to remember that there's a lot of ways these things happen. So just this is point of interest that I think you might, help put this together in your brain, is that a lot of people think about this as it has to go all the way up to your brain and then all the way back down to whatever extremity, and this big complicated thing. You have other ways of your body functioning when it experiences pain. The example of pulling your hand away from a hot stove, when you experience this extreme sensation, the signal doesn't even go all the way to your brain. It just goes to your spinal cord, loops back around. You have an involuntary jerk back reaction where you pull your hand away. So like, these are different ways that your nerves work, different ways that they send signals, because getting to your brain wasn't even fast enough. It wasn't good enough. That extra millisecond could have caused you a little bit more pain. So like, there's lots of beautiful ways that these things work. And you can track the history of it. It's not a mystery. Yeah. I don't know, man. I think it's just a very simple explanation.
And to riff off a little bit of what Forrest was just saying, these systems aren't perfect. They're not well designed by any stretch of the imagination, because they're easy enough to fool and get crosswired. And that happens because they're not well-designed system, because you had a mad tinkerer, a metaphorical tinkerer back there, just putting stuff together and having to keep the organisms running while they tinkered with other stuff. And so some of that redundancy comes from some of that as well, like the laryngeal nerve. Why does it do what it does, and why does it take the path that it does? It wraps around, I can't remember.
Your heart.
It wraps around the heart. I just remember what part, but wraps around the heart and then comes back up. Well, that's the nerve that controls our vocal cords. It does the same thing in humans that it does in giraffes. It's dumb enough in humans for the nerve that controls the vocal cords to go all the way down, wrap around the heart, come all the way back up. But it's even dumber in giraffes. And it's the same in, in multiple species, all have the same issue. And the reason why is it started off as something else way back when, and then as things evolved and changed, its function changed, and eventually became what we now call a voice box and a laryngeal nerve. But to say that's well designed is to completely and totally misunderstand engineering. As a software engineer, I don't try to make things more complicated, despite what people say about software. I try to make things easier, and I don't know of a single engineer that intentionally tries to make things complicated and call that good engineering. They try to simplify things, and that's not what we see with the nervous system.
Yeah, there's 1,000,001 examples of that exact thing. When we talk about vestigial structures, these leftovers from evolution, it's a fascinating topic. But I will talk about that for 5 hours, and I want to get on to what else Brett had to say. What was the next thing? I hope that answers your question.
Looks like he dropped.
Oh, well, crap. I'm sorry. I hope that was enough for you. I hope that helped a little bit. I know we kind of went off on a bunny trail there, man, but I hope it answered your question somewhat.
Yep. All right. Well, and we've got this brand new store. Visit tiny.cc/merch ACA. That's merch ACA to get your favorite items like t-shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs, and check out our brand new items like beanies, cell phone cases, and tote bags. We even now feature a special limited edition item each month. Be sure to check out our stores and all the stores of the other shows. Right below the chat, you'll notice there is a donate now box. Donations made there mean that the ACA will get 100% of the proceeds. YouTube does not take a cut, and that is the best way to support us. If you would like to continue the discussion after the show, join us in the ACD, the Atheist Community of Discord, the fan-run Discord server at tiny.cc/ACD Discord. And finally, we want to send a big thank you out to the crew who put this show together every week. And honestly, the crew does it all. And I'm sure Forrest is having a lot better time now that he doesn't have to worry about all the things
you have no idea
our crew take care of in the background that just allow us to sit here and talk to all the callers, and they do all the timestamps on there and fill out the description so you guys can find the calls, and make it all searchable. They do all that kind of great, wonderful stuff in the background, and we honestly, this show would be a lot less fun to do without them. So thank you guys so much.
I got to get a crew. They're awesome, dude.
Yeah, show up, do the tech check, and start taking calls.
Yeah.
That's all we got to do.
Easy peasy.
Yep. All right. And here we go. This should be a good phone call. This is Matthew in South Carolina. You're on with Jim and Forrest.
Hey, Matthew.
Hey, how are y'all doing?
Awesome,
Doing
man. How are
good.
You? I know there's.
So it sounds like you want.
I'll try not to run.
That's fine. Says you want to talk about the biology of being trans.
Yes. So I have I guess, a problem with it because I think that it feels to me, and I haven't looked into the subject a whole lot, but it feels to me like a person choosing to be something that they weren't biologically born to be is an issue.
Okay. But before I turn Forrest loose on this, because he's going to be much better at this than I am, I just want to ask a simple question. Are you aware that people are born with both sets of genitalia, are born intersex?
Yes, and I think those are special circumstances that are basically the percentage of that is almost not even a blip.
It's less than 1%, but it doesn't mean it's right. It's less than 1%, if I remember, at 1.5%. But if that's possible, then why wouldn't the rest of the biology be possible?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question. The rest of the biology.
So if it's possible for a person, and it is possible, since people are in fact born intersex, why isn't it possible that? And when I say intersex, people are born with full sets of both genitalia and partial sets and everything in between. So why are you finding it hard to believe that trans people just are no different than intersex people who are born without a full set of genitalia?
Well, I think there's a glaring difference there, and that's why you're differentiating between someone who is not intersex and someone who is.
There is a difference, but it's not. I don't think it's as crazy as you think. So let me. I'm going to talk your ear off for just a second, Matthew, but I promise I am going to let you jump in here. I just want to give you a little bit of context from a biological standpoint, because the biggest thing here is that what you talked about at the very beginning. You said what they were born as biologically, I think is the way you said it, like their biological sex. The phrase biological sex is sort of just this stand-in for genitalia a lot of the times. That's the way that it's used, because when you talk to people about trans folks, when you talk about biological sex of them, what they often talk about is either genitalia or their chromosomes, specifically their sex chromosomes, aka their allosomes. If you're into that kind of language, it's fun. Whether you're XX or XY and so on and so on. The fact of the matter, however, is that number one, that's not actually how we define sex in biology. And number two, the way that we do define sex in biology doesn't work all of the time. Just like every single definition in biology, there's a whole bunch of holes, there's a whole bunch of caveats, there's a whole bunch of if and except and unless and until and all these different things. There are very, very few definitions in biology that are very cut and dry, and sex is absolutely no exception to that. So when we talk about what Jim was just saying about intersex people, having both sets of genitalia is just one example of that. There isn't just XX and XY. You could be XXY. That's called Klinefelter syndrome. That's 3 sex chromosomes. You could be X and nothing else. You could be XY and still have a female body. When we talk about, what these chromosomes are, remember, chromosomes are made of genes. And so you could have damage or changes to one or more of the genes on those chromosomes and have a completely different presentation no matter what your chromosomes say. Also, all those genes are doing is coding for proteins and hormones and things, and those have to bind to receptors on your cells in order to make your body do anything, and those cell receptors are controlled by totally different genes. So the language of genetics is in no way like simple or easy to decipher, anything like that. So one example that I gave recently, I made a YouTube video about this, and so this is just one that's off the top of my head, is, when you talk about genitalia, you talk about gonads. You, me, and everybody else on this call, everybody else listening to this, has the genes for both ovaries and testes. And there's a complicated genetic dance between your sex chromosomes to finally get you to where you are, wherever you are, whether you have one or the other or both or neither or half of one or half of the other. You can have an ovotesty, which is an organ that has tissue from literally both. It's craziness. And so you have all these different examples. And again, that's just talking about chromosomes, which has nothing to do with our definition of sex. The actual definition of sex in biology is the size of your sex cells, your gametes. If you have lots and lots of very small gametes, we call those sperm and we call you a boy. If you have very few big gametes, we call those eggs and we call you a girl. But there are species that produce more than just the two sizes. There are species that produce just one size. There are species that have both sizes within one individual. There are species that produce asexually. So what does this definition even mean in the grand scheme of things? The point is that when you throw around terms like biological sex, what you're actually doing is you're playing into, I wouldn't use the term a dog whistle, but a really, really myopic and parochial way of looking at the world that doesn't fit with actual biology. So when you throw around things like, oh, well, you were born biologically a male or biologically this or that, and you're choosing to be something else, not only is that a gross oversimplification of how these people actually feel and what they're actually going through, but it's also a misrepresentation of actual biological science. And unfortunately, that's something that isn't talked about a lot because why would you ever study that unless you wanted to become a biologist? Anyway, like I said, I was going to talk for a while. I have way more that I could talk about, but I want to hear your response to that and see if that helps in any way.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I've never heard it explained quite that way. So from my viewpoint, I would think the vast majority, or I would think anyway, before you explained it that way, that the vast majority of people are born male or female, and then they don't feel like they're a male or female. And so then they take steps that we now can take in this day and age to change their outward appearance. And I'm not a biologist, so I'm probably wrong on this, but in my mindset, I was thinking, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Go and finish. I don't want to cut you off, but what you just said is important. I want to come back to it. So remind me, finish what you're saying.
Okay. So then in my viewpoint, I was just like, well, why do you have to redefine your entire being? Why don't you just be a dude that dresses like a girl and be okay with that? Because if you go into the emergency room and say my stomach hurts and I'm a male, or but then you have a uterus in there, it just seems like unnecessary confusion.
Right. Okay. So it's really important that you bring all of that up. Actually, I'm so glad that you said all of that. So first of all, I forgot to say earlier on when Jim was talking about intersex people, and he talked about people born with both sexes genitalia, all these different configurations of having different kinds of sex chromosomes all fit into what we call the intersex, and the actual likelihood of that happening, the actual percent cases, is about the same as the likelihood of having red hair. So as many redheads as there are in the world, that's about how many intersex people there are in the world. Just so you know, it's not as rare as you might think. And lots of people don't even find out until like well into their life when they, for some reason, have a DNA test and they're like, oh shit, it turns out I had this situation going on. Anyway, and so what you talked about there, when you talked about someone who is, born a male, but they just don't feel like it, they don't feel this way or the other. There's a reason for that. One great example of that is that you have, I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty details of this because nobody wants to hear this shit, but there are structures in your brain that are dimorphic. So male brains look this way and female brains look that way. And it's not the dumb old, men are smarter or whatever. These are patches of neurons the size of a grain of rice that are either a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller, whatever. And we find consistently that trans people have brains that match their gender identities, not their genitalia. So it's not just that they woke up today and said, I think I want to be a girl today. It's that they literally have a woman's brain trapped inside, this, what you would call a male body. So it's a lot more complex than that. So when you're talking about why not just be a man wearing a dress and get away, there are some people that's totally fine. They just prefer the way that they look in dresses, and that's radical. I don't wear a dress because it's really breezy and uncomfortable. That is the only reason that I don't. And so, if I had a different opinion, I would probably wear one, right? But that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about trans people. We are talking about women. This is not a man wearing a dress feeling like a woman. This is a woman who, may have had the body that she didn't want to have, but it's not just a man playing dress up. It's not a woman who feels this way or that way. So it's again, it's an oversimplification, but because I'm not going to get into a 3-hour lecture on all of this, but you don't want that either. But this is a woman who feels like a woman and is having to deal with the problems of having a man's body and being perceived as a man by, the people around her. As far as medicine, which was the last thing you brought up, and I'm so happy you said that at the last moment there, talking about, if you go to the hospital and you say, hey, I'm a woman and I'm here to do this. And then they, lift up her skirt and they're like, oh, well, you clearly don't have a uterus. So what are we supposed to do with you? This is why there's such a push for trans acceptance and trans visibility now. And this is why there are so many biologists that are trying to talk about this stuff, because the simple fact of the matter is, just like with our definition of sex, it doesn't function. And that's fine. In biology, that's fine. The same way our definition of species doesn't make any damn sense either. And that's fine in biology because we know how to work around it. But when you're talking about the general public, that can kind of get sticky because now there's legal issues and there's medical issues and there's, sometimes moral and cultural issues that come along with this. So the big push here is just to identify the fact that, number one, sex and gender are completely different things. Gender is a social construct, not a biological one. You can't reduce down gender norms to biological sex, nor can you predict gender norms from biological sex. So these are very different things. Not one of them is a binary. Neither sex nor gender are binary. And the way that we perceive these things in our culture simply don't work. You cannot boil down almost 8 billion human beings into 2 boxes. It just doesn't work out that way. And so we need to have a serious adult conversation about how we want to treat these people and how we want to move on forward, re-identifying the way that we categorize people, or if we want to even categorize people at all. And when we talk about groups like this that have been historically marginalized and ignored and disenfranchised, I think it's really important to remember the phrase, nothing about us without us. It's their choice how we should be talking about them, treating them, working with them. It's their choice to give us instructions on how they want to be talked to, the same way that you and I would expect to have a public civil discourse. And that's kind of the direction that we're trying to move this in now, is where do we go from here now that we realize things aren't nearly as simple as we once thought they were, because nothing in biology is basic biology. Where do we go from here? Does that help answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, that's great. You brought up a good point too that I was talking to the call screener about. You said in the same way that in biology, differentiating between male and female works, but not in social. But then you said it's the same thing as species. So I did have a follow-up question. What do you think about people? I've seen reports of people that literally feel like they are a different type of animal, so then they get major transformation surgeries and things like that to look like that animal and live out their life like a lizard or whatever. Isn't that sort of on the same? Oh, it's different, but it's sort of on the same plane. Do you think do you give the same freedoms to them socially as you would a male or female thing?
So I think it's really important to point out the fact, and I'm not calling you out here, chastising you. I want to be very clear. I think you have good intentions asking that. But
okay. I have a thick skin. You're not going to hurt my feelings. It's fine.
Well, I just want to be clear that I don't think that I think that you're well intentioned in asking that question, but I think it's really important to point out the fact that conflating those two things is detrimental, because when we're talking about trans people, we're not talking about psychosis. We're not talking about a disorder. We're not talking about anything like that. We're talking about, there's a reason why gender dysphoria and this such are not considered the same thing psychologically today that they were 30 years ago. But when we talk about somebody who is, wanting to, be a lizard or whatever you're talking about like that, I think that is on a completely different playing field. I would have the same argument of just like, as long as you're not hurting anybody and it's you and however many other consenting adults, who gives a shit? Like, I would have that same philosophy, but I would have that same philosophy for a completely different reason. And honestly, you know what? I would view that specific situation the same way that I would with tattoos, piercings, or whatever else. If it makes you happy and you're not hurting anybody else, do whatever you want to do. There's that guy who's turning himself into the black alien, cutting off parts of his hand and his nose and all those things. If he's happy and he's doing what he wants to do with his own body, let them do it. That's radical. But I do want to make it sure to really clarify the fact that, you know, the argument that usually comes out of what you just said is transracial, trans species, trans whatever else, is to diminutize and to make a joke out of being transgender, and that they cannot be compared in this way.
Well, I wasn't obviously, like you said, trying to.
I didn't think you were. That's why I was trying to make sure to say at the beginning. I think you were being good intentioned asking that, but I want to be very clear because there's a lot of other people watching that, you know, that those are not comparable, and there are a lot of other people who would use that example to be a dick. I don't think you are. I just want to make sure to make that clear for the rest of the audience. You know what I mean?
So to be clear, you would not give somebody who felt like they were a lizard or felt like they were black and they're actually white, like you said, you wouldn't give them the same thought process as you would the male versus female issue. Then
no, they would be in completely different playing fields. It would be a completely different conversation, completely different reasons, because concepts of species and concepts of race are completely different than concepts of gender, biologically, socially, all of the above.
All right, cool. That makes a lot of sense. That was a great talk. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening to me ramble, Matthew. I appreciate your patience.
Yep.
Oh, that was fantastic.
All right. Thanks, Matthew. Have a good day. All right. That was a good call.
We're getting so many really nice people today.
Yeah. And I think one of the things is gender is part of the human experience, whereas deciding you want to be a puppy for the rest of your life or something along those lines is not part of well, I don't want to say it's not part of the human experience. It doesn't sound quite right, but it's not part of the same thing.
Yeah, right? No, not at all. Not at all. That's why I didn't want to get into the details, but like I was saying, race, gender, species, these are all completely to try to talk about them in the same breath would be doing each of them a disservice. You know what I mean?
Yeah. One's about what DNA expression and how we interpret it, and the other one is about personal desires to make you happy.
Yeah.
But we've got other shows on than the Atheist Experience, including the nonprofit Secular Sexuality, Truth Wanted, and Talk Heathen. If you didn't catch all the shows last week, here's a taste of things you probably want to go back and watch.
If you can get someone to acknowledge that there's a person suffering from gender dysphoria, and the way to alleviate that dysphoria is with a particular treatment, then they have to justify why we shouldn't be applying that treatment. It's if we teach kids about sex ed, then we also have to send them to war.
Right. I don't think that makes sense, though.
Shocker.
This is a story that is flagrantly right out in the open, fake. Some religions, you can get some wiggle room on it, but this Joseph Smith, we know he made this up. He's up there with L. Ron Hubbard in absurdities.
The creation of suffering. No, mate, I'll mute you if you're going to try and talk. I was obviously not done. I'm not finished talking.
Are you done?
Oh, no, not really. I'm going to click the little mute button if you're going to start getting all grumpy.
The ultimate foundation of morality, which I would describe as well-being, is a subjective foundation. But once you have a foundation,
you've had this conversation for decades about morality and continue to repeat the same things. But when
because I'm right.
All right. And that's what's been going on around the ACA on the other shows. All right, let's get on to the next caller, and we're going to take Theodore in Pennsylvania. You're on with Forrest and Jim.
What's up, Theodore?
Hi, how's it going?
It's going really well, man. How are you?
Pretty good. Just hanging out here home alone. I'm pretty sure I have COVID, so
I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
Thank you for quarantining, though. A lot of people don't do that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it kind of sucks, but whatever.
Yeah.
Easter. But
All right.
What
So
can I do
you're
for you,
going to
man?
talk about generic subjective continuity and would like to convince us to agree with you. So what is generic subjective continuity?
Okay, so Sam Harris did a podcast episode on it, and that episode was called The Paradox of Death. And I'll try to explain it. So it says that after we die, instead of there being like a black void, an eternal black void that some people envision, like there's going to be a black void after we die, or they call it nothingness or eternal oblivion. Like Richard Dawkins in a review of a book not too long ago, he said that death would be followed by peaceful oblivion, implying that after we die, it's going to be like this eternal experience of peace and, you know, a kind of deprivation of any conscious experience. But what generic subjective continuity says is that after we die, because other brains will be doing consciousness, that death, instead of being followed by a black void, would be followed by yet more experience via other brains, one of the brains that are doing consciousness rather than a black void. And so it's like the same way that you didn't exist, but then a brain was born and that brain started doing consciousness, and that consciousness is, the name of it is Jim. The same thing would happen again, because death would also be the same as non-existence before birth. So once again, if a brain does consciousness after you cease to exist, then the same thing happens again. Just like non-existence before birth was followed by a consciousness, so death would also be followed by a consciousness via a living brain.
It sounds like you've got a really weird long form of reincarnation here, where like my consciousness is going to go into a different brain or something.
Yeah, I'm kind of confused too, because there doesn't seem to be any evidence for that, right? We don't have memories from one existence to the next, if that's what you're saying.
No, it's definitely not reincarnation. That's definitely not what we're saying. We're saying that it's a non-dualist idea. There's no souls or anything like that. Maybe I should use this short thought experiment to explain it better. Sure. So there's no souls. It's a completely naturalistic idea. No transferring of consciousness. The whole idea is based off of the naturalistic idea that brains do consciousness, that consciousness is a function of brains. And so a short thought experiment would be, if we were to imagine that every single conscious organism in the entire universe were to die right now, and every single consciousness is gone at that point, but then say like at some point in the future, excuse me, some point in the future, somehow a new conscious being is born somewhere in the universe. It doesn't matter where, but they're born, and so that now is the only consciousness that exists. That's the only one that's occurring at that point in time. So then, rather than all those people that died being in a black void, the only experience that exists at that point in time would be that the one being done by that one and only living brain.
Well,
and so,
so I just have a question. Where do these, when you Thanos snap these consciousnesses, these living beings with consciousness, and you kill them, where does their consciousness go? It just stops existing, right?
Correct. They just.
So why are we talking about? Why are we talking about it? They're done. They're over with, right? Now, sometime later, you've got a new consciousness. So. It knows nothing
like
about
if
the previous ones.
It's like asking, like, if I blow out this candle, but then I strike a match over here, those are two completely separate events that both happen to involve fire, but they have nothing to do with each other. So if one consciousness dies and another one is born, cool. That those are two different events. They mean nothing, together.
Correct.
I don't understand what you're asking.
Well, instead of us anticipating an experience of nothingness after death, instead, because other brains will be doing consciousness after we die, then there will be experience after we die.
Someone else will be having an experience after we die. We will not.
Right.
If I get off of the roller coaster and the next char goes on, they are now riding the roller coaster. I am not. That doesn't mean that this is a continuous thing, right?
Right. Well, it will be consciousness being done by another brain. Like right now, consciousness is being done by this brain called Theodore, and consciousness is being done by a brain called Jim and a brain called Forrest. And if we were all to die right now, there would still be other brains doing consciousness.
Yeah, we're agreeing with that. We just don't see what the connection is. Yeah. What's the connection between someone who is, the consciousness of someone who's dead and us? What's that connection?
There is actually no connection. That's where the word generic comes into it, because there's no personal continuity from me to the next consciousness.
So why do we care? What's so special about this that you want us to believe it?
What are you arguing for here? I'm sorry, I don't think I'm understanding. Like, what is the thing that you're trying to convince us of?
Well, one, it would answer for naturalists and naturalistic atheists. It would be the answer to what happens after we die, and it refutes the whole idea of people saying, "Well, after we die, there's nothingness," and
how does it refute that?
Oblivion. And
how does it refute that at all?
Because
someone else is now alive. That doesn't make me less dead. Yeah, so if I'm dead and I now have this lack of consciousness, I am now, because when you talk about oblivion and all this, like, I want to be clear, we're not saying that we are going to experience oblivion. We're not going to experience anything. We will. The consciousness stops. Right. The fire is blown out. It didn't go anywhere else. The candle is now out. So what does anyone else living have to do with me, have to do with my consciousness? How does that refute anything?
Okay, let's go back to, you said about the candles, right?
Yeah. If I blow out a candle, the fire didn't go to another candle. Another candle being lit doesn't change the state of this candle. The candle is blown out. The fire doesn't exist anymore. I die. My consciousness doesn't exist anymore. Same thing.
Correct. Okay, but the thing is, the room is still lit. You can still see the room, right?
By other candles, not this one. Yeah?
Yeah, exactly. So that's what consciousness isn't like the flame. Consciousness is like the illuminated room. It's like...
Okay, so now you're making a totally different claim, saying that consciousness has some sort of external thing beyond my mind. Are you talking about like the actions that I can perform? Or are you talking like some sort of like energy field that consciousness emerges from? What are you trying to get at?
I'm just talking about like consciousness is a way for the universe to basically see itself, in a sense.
That's a poetic way to say that we're made of stardust, but that doesn't track as far as like something physical existing.
Yeah, I'm not sure that you understand the concept well enough to explain it to us, because I think Forrest and I will both agree, when we die, all kinds of things happen. We just don't know about it anymore, and we don't participate anymore because we're dead, right? Yeah. But I don't know why it deserves a special name or all this rigmarole to explain what it is. When you die, you stop existing. The rest of the planet and every living thing in the universe continues on until they die.
Yep.
It doesn't seem to be special to me or shocking.
Well, okay, so let me ask you, what happened the last time you didn't exist? What happened after the last time you didn't exist?
I began existing at one point. So I didn't exist for billions of years. Life went on. And then, as you said at the beginning, then one day some cells arranged themselves into a brain that was mine. I began existing. Eventually I will stop existing. Those cells won't exist anymore. And billions more years will pass. This is not a magical thing.
Right. You are something a brain does. So you didn't exist, but then a brain did you. A brain is doing, like you in a generic sense, a brain is doing consciousness. So after this brain dies, if you imagine that after this brain dies and then another brain comes to exist somewhere else, it will do.
It has absolutely nothing to do with my brain now.
Yeah,
a new brain coming. A newborn being born after I die has nothing to do with me dying.
I know it's not a continuation of you. It's just that there will be experience after this experience ends.
So someone else's experience, Like we all agree that some of us will die and then other people will be born. We all agree that there are consciousness that exist today and won't exist soon, and that new other. We just don't see why there's a why there needs to be a connection. There's no that doesn't make any sense to say that someone else gaining consciousness is a continuation of anything, has any connection whatsoever. It's like you talked about the consciousness is what a brain is doing. My brain is being Forrest today. Yeah, I would agree with that. The way that the tides are the result of all the water molecules and the moon working together. The tide is an emergent property of all these things. No one water molecule has tide, right? No one neuron is me. It's the emergent property of all of the electrochemical activity of my entire brain, all acting together, is me. If you destroy any one part of that, you would destroy a part of me. You can take out my frontal lobe and go study like Phineas Gage, right? If you take out a part of my brain, my personality would change. My experience would change. Does that mean that a part of me is now elsewhere doing something and it's just waiting for the rest of me? If someone dies of dementia or with dementia, with dementia, does that mean that little by little, just parts of them became another thing somewhere until it all formed together? What is any of that? I don't we all agree with your premise. It's where you're going with it that makes no sense at all. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, I agree with everything you just said too. The reason it matters is because instead of anticipating nothingness after death, we should anticipate that death would be followed by yet more consciousness, except for in different
who?
Context.
For whom? Who would experience the consciousness after you die? Who would experience consciousness after you die?
Consciousness is a product of the brain. The self is an illusion. There is really.
I'm sorry. I really want to answer that question. Who is going to experience consciousness after you die?
Other sentient.
So
beings.
not you. Not you.
No.
So why would you expect more consciousness if you're not going to experience more consciousness? How does that make any sense? Why would you expect anything else but nothing?
I can't experience my own lack of existence. Only experience is experienced.
Precisely. So why would you expect anything but that? You will stop experiencing things. You will not even know you've stopped experiencing things because you're not experiencing things. You will stop. The same way you were before you were born. Nobody else was living for you then. You're not going to experience another consciousness. Nothing. It's just like I don't get where you're seeing a connection with you and anything else besides you.
My point is what you keep calling you. A you is a self, and a self is something that a brain does, just like
I agree. Yeah,
a brain does. Yeah. So, okay, let me try it. So imagine that there's just the entire universe is completely empty, devoid of all consciousness, and then
sure.
a single and then one single conscious organism comes to exist. And that's the only consciousness that's occurring, right? And so that's the only experience there is. And we'll just say that's you, Forrest or Jim, whoever.
Why not?
I feel we've just been down this road, and and we're still not getting it, either because you don't understand it well enough to explain it to us, which is possible, or we're just not seeing where you're, because we're just not seeing where you're going with it. It makes no sense to talk about any experience after we're dead. We're dead. And
Well,
yes,
actually,
other people will still be alive.
Well, it means that the future after I'm dead matters. Like it matters because my effect on the future of those future consciousnesses, the things that I do in my life now, can affect those future.
That's a completely separate. That's a completely separate thing, though.
Yeah,
if I go and build a house, then someday after I'm dead, someone might live in that house. That has nothing to do with my consciousness after I die. It's my consciousness alive today that did a thing that has repercussions. You're just explaining the concept of a legacy or consequences for your actions. That's not a controversial idea. It's not anything mystical or magical.
Right.
But those.
I'm sorry. I don't get why that matters at all. I'm sorry.
Those future consciousnesses are the experiences that will be what's occurring at that point in time.
Yeah, we agree. We just don't see what the connection is.
But they're not you.
Right, because every time you go down this path, it sounds like you're talking about some form of reincarnation, and yet you say you're not talking about that. And this is where we're getting confused, right? Because we don't understand what the connection is then.
Some people do actually call generic subjective continuity. Some people do call it secular reincarnation or rebirth.
It makes about as much sense as religious reincarnation.
Yeah, it really does.
I'm sorry, man. You're not taking us anywhere interesting here.
And we've been over the same ground at least twice now. So why don't you think about it, find a better way to explain it, and give us a call back.
Okay. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks for your time, Theodore.
Bye.
Take care.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, and he said it came from Sam Harris, and I haven't read everything Sam. Yeah, or at least he doesn't understand what Sam Harris said, and that's entirely possible. So, all right, this one should be interesting as well. We're going to take Jay right here in Texas. How you doing, Jay? You're on with Jim and Forrest.
Hello, Jay.
I'm doing good. Happy Easter. How about? I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Doing mighty fine. So you had a near-death experience that proves the afterlife.
Well, it proves that there's something after this consciousness, I think. Just like how.
Would you mind telling us why?
Well, my experience is when I went, it was just clear and everything, and I saw myself, but except myself was golden, and
so,
I
Jay,
had flew back in.
Could I interrupt you for a second?
And yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This may seem rude, and I promise I'm not trying to be, but I would like you to explain, before you explain what you saw, or rather than explaining what you saw, would you please explain to me why it convinced you that there's something more beyond this life? Because lots of people have had near-death experiences, lots of people have had out-of-body experiences, lots of people have had all these things, and not a single one of them actually gives us any compelling evidence for anything after death. All at the very first call, we talked about lucid dreams, we talked about DMT, we talked about chemicals in the brain that cause these hallucinations. We talked about all that stuff earlier. So what I want to understand, rather than what you saw, I'm sure what you saw was really, really cool. I too have had cool dreams. Why does it convince you that there's something beyond this life? Why is it that poignant to you?
Because it was real, and I was dead. They had me on life support, I had a full
Yeah,
blood
lots of
transfusion.
people have died and come back from that.
And the
So
whole thing was it was like, I don't know how to put it, in the sense of, because I may have not been physically feeling it, but it was feeling it. And you may not be able to I don't know, I guess it's like a transition of state, like from water to gas to solid, from fire to smoke, from wood to charcoal.
yeah, phases. Got it. Yeah.
I mean, it's not in that same state, but then again, it was very real as I'm talking to you right now, and as
Right.
Real
question.
Sense, the real as in feeling, the real as in even touch.
Well, the problem that I have is the brain is more than capable of taking hallucinating things in such a way that they're real, that they seem real. I mean, there's the famous mathematician, was it Graham? His last name is Nash. I think his first name is Graham. He's notorious for this. If you watched Beautiful Mind, you know, he thought real people were giving him information about communists and plots and acting on it. He thought they were real. Brains are known to do this. So how do you differentiate brain being a brain and it actually being reality, or reality being just in your brain and actual reality?
Well, I've talked to other people who've had these same, and some people tell me they just see darkness. And I don't know, because what I was doing before my accident is I lived a pretty karma positive life. And the people that I talked to who had this happen kind of did very like unpositive things. And
so you think that the people who didn't see anything, that isn't evidence for there being nothing, the same way as you seeing something is evidence for something. It's evidence for you just being a better person than them.
I wouldn't say that. I would just say maybe, I mean, I don't know, because.
So let me ask you this then, because Jim just asked a really pointed question, and I feel like it kind of got skimmed past a little bit. So I'm going to elaborate on it just a little bit. Is when I was in college, I did acid once, right? And the world got very weird, and the back of my couch became a living mural of cowboys and Native Americans interacting, and it was very, very, moving to me to see this. And then I tripped and fell off of my own face at one point. The world was insane, and then I came down, and that stopped being the case. So how do I know that my experience wasn't me actually interacting with another dimension beyond our own, and it wasn't actually me seeing beyond the fabric of our reality and or I was high? How do you know that your experience was this other plane of existence rather than your brain was deprived of oxygen and it saw weird things? You had a dream.
Well, because I really didn't see weird things.
It sounds like you said some weird things.
Where the plane was just like the exact setting and scenery was just like where I was, because I had
cool. I had a dream about doing dishes once. Does that mean that it was more real because it was just normal doing dishes?
No. My wound was self-inflicted, and I woke up in the same place where I was, where I did the thing.
Yeah, that's fine. What I'm asking is, how do you know that it was anything more than a hallucination? What gives you the reason to believe that this was anything more than just your brain dying and coming up with crazy, fantastic? Because right now, you're seeing and hearing and feeling and tasting and smelling. These are all processes in your brain, right?
They were carrying me to the yeah, but they were. I was feeling them carrying me to the medical tent, and them taking off my clothes, cutting it off, and them cutting open my side.
I like to sleep with the TV on, and sometimes I'll have dreams that incorporate what the Game Grumps are saying on TV. That's how dreams work. You incorporate things from outside your dream all the time. That's not anything magical.
No. This is what they were doing, because that's what happened when I got a self-inflicted gunshot wound when I was deployed, and I was feeling all this. They had picked me up and they did all this. They had told me this, but then I went back to the place where I fell, which was about 200 yards back, and that's where all this stuff happened. And then I had just woken up in Germany, and I thought I was just out for a couple of minutes.
So do you accept the idea? Like, do you think it's true that people can lose time, that they can be in a state, like a fugue state where they lose? Okay, so that is a thing that can happen.
I've had dreams.
No, I'm not just talking about dreams. I'm talking about situations where people will lose whole hours, maybe even whole days of their lives, and they just don't remember it. Do you think that's a thing that can happen? Because it is. You have that can happen. It can happen usually in response to trauma, right? So people can lose track of time. People can lose memories. People can have hallucinations. People can have crazy dreams. People can incorporate things in the real world into their hallucinogenic state. Brains that are deprived of oxygen, people who are dying, people who are suffering, people who are going through a suicide attempt, whatever, do see these crazy things and have these out-of-body experiences. Not one of those things leads to a supernatural claim or evidence of a supernatural claim. So you putting them all together doesn't lead evidence of... Sorry?
What about if it was just a transition, like I told you before, with water to gas to solid, from liquid?
You would have to then give me evidence that there was something to transition to. You would have to give me evidence that there was something to transition to before
like, do we have to transition into like another physical being, or just another wavelength? Because waves,
you're making the claim.
Radio waves exist, right?
Sure, but they have nothing to do with your consciousness.
Yeah.
But what is consciousness, though?
It's the emergent property of the electrical...
feeling, right?
Yeah, this is what we just talked about. It's the emergent property of the electrochemical activity of your brain. There's the last call we just had.
That's a feeling, though, right? That's a feeling, right?
Feelings are associated with it, but I wouldn't say consciousness is a feeling, no.
But it's something that could be measured, though, right? You can measure it, though, right? Like, we could measure
I wouldn't know. I guess so, yeah.
Database and everything, right? Right?
Sure. In the same way you can talk about...
If we can measure it, then we could also like deconstruct it in a way, right?
So again, I'm going to give you the exact same example I gave the last caller then. The exact same example I just gave the last guy. If I light a candle, there's a flame on the candle. If I blow out the fire, where did it go? Did the fire become something new? Or did it just stop existing? The chemical reaction that is fire, converting hydrocarbons and oxygen into carbon dioxide and water, stopped. The chemical reaction that is your consciousness stopped.
No, yeah.
It's just like
the fire did not become smoke. The fire did not become smoke.
Kept me alive.
That's not how it is.
Brought me back. Well, then what is?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's good doctors and good medicine.
Smoke, right? Yeah.
Sorry.
But see, just like the candle could. Yeah, but what is But see, just like the candle could be relit, I could be brought back to life. And just like how flame went out and turned into smoke, but the smoke could come back because the fire could be relit and you can blow out the candle again and the smoke will come back.
Right. I just want to be very clear. I just want to be very clear. There are no units. So when you talk about fire, it doesn't turn into anything. Fire is a chemical reaction. It's converting hydrocarbons and oxygen into carbon dioxide and water. That is the chemical process of fire. Yeah. Consciousness is a chemical reaction as well. That didn't change into anything else. The reaction stopped. It ceased. And then you can restart it. But that's all. So when you die, your consciousness stops. You don't transition into anything else because there's nothing to transition into. It is a process, a chemical process that has stopped. There's no next thing.
Yeah, but where does the smoke go? Just like consciousness.
Of
like,
a fire?
Consciousness have to stay in the vessel.
Smoke is a byproduct of fire. It has not anything to do with the fire itself. Smoke is a byproduct of fire in the same way me writing on a paper is a byproduct of my consciousness. The writing on the paper can't turn back into me.
But what is the byproduct of your consciousness after you leave your body? Like, where does that go?
No consciousness stops. We have no reason to believe that
rotting
it
organic.
continues.
Yeah, the byproduct of my consciousness after I die is this rotting sack of meat that's going to get eaten by bacteria. That's all.
Yeah, but we can make humans. Human beings are just elements. They're elements that a kid can buy with his allowance. We can
I agree.
make human beings. But why
we can
can't we
make one
human being though? Why can't we put something in that human being that makes him a human being that we could all say, that's a human being that I could talk to?
Oh, you do. It's called DNA.
We could physically make one. Yeah,
It's called DNA. That's what makes us human. DNA makes us human. There's nothing external to us.
Human.
So if you're arguing for the concept of a soul, what you need to do is show how a soul interconnects with the neurons and how it interacts with neurons and how it makes neurons fire. Because we know how neurons fire, and there's nothing magical about it, right? There's no soul there. There's no consciousness there.
There's no such thing. Neurons to create the soul.
We don't think that there is
the soul would, then whatever you call a soul created by neurons will die when the neurons die, right? And we also know this because
it's just like the flame in the.
Well, so explain how damage to the brain can create a whole new consciousness, a whole new person with a whole different set of EKGs. How does that happen with brain damage?
It doesn't create a whole new person.
Yes, it does.
A whole new person, but that consciousness
yes, it does.
That brain. The consciousness that brain?
If you sufficient damage to the brain can create a whole new person with a whole new set of likes, dislikes, and a whole new set of EKGs. Whole new person out of it.
Well, then that would be probably more of an evidence of consciousness than anything else, because if it was consciousness, then
consciousness comes from the brain.
Kind of trauma would be done.
Have you heard of Phineas Gage, Jay?
Oh, yeah.
Jay, have you ever heard of a person named Phineas Gage?
No.
Okay, so Phineas Gage was a guy. This is a very, very famous case study from every single neurobiology, every single psychology class ever, right? You've got, hang on. You've got in your head.
Here we go with the props. Yay!
All right, so inside your brain, I know we do have some audio listeners, but I'll explain, okay? Inside your brain, you've got different lobes. You've got different parts of your brain that do different things. This front area right here is called your frontal lobe, right? This is where your personality sits, among a lot of other things. I am oversimplifying here. This part here is where you are, right? This is why a lobotomy, a frontal lobotomy, basically just turns off a person's personality. This part of your brain is really important for decision making. It's really important for ethics and moral thinking. It's really important for deciding what you want to do with your life, actions and consequences. That's all part of this. Phineas Gage was working on a railroad back in the 1800s. He was known for being a very sober, very kind, very rational, very calm, very hardworking person. And he was in a tunnel working on this railroad. There was an explosion and some dynamite went off that wasn't supposed to, and it launched a steel rod straight up through his skull and completely obliterated his frontal lobe. And it was so hot and so fast that it cauterized on the way out, and he was able to get up and walk out of the mine with this giant hole that just blew off half of his brain. And he went to the doctor, and the doctor was like, you're all right, go back to work tomorrow, take some aspirin, walk it off. And he did. And from that day forward, Phineas Gage was violent and cruel and sexually aggressive and mean because it took out this part of the brain that handles that kind of processing of saying, what kind of person do I want to be? Do I want to obey my raw animal instincts, or do I want to think a little bit more? This right here is what causes your consciousness. And when Phineas Gage lost a part of it, he became a completely different person. It completely changed who he was. This was the reason why it's such a famous case study, is because this is one of the reasons that we learned about different parts of your brain doing different things. The doctors are like, hey, this part of the brain seems to be pretty important for this. And so if we can completely change a person just by changing the structure of this lump of jelly right here, then how can you sit here and say that my consciousness goes on beyond this brain? Did a part of Phineas Gage go off and become something else, and then the rest of it came along with it when he died? Did Phineas Gage's soul change? Did his soul fragment? Like, what could you possibly point to that goes beyond the actual physical thing that we see that does everything you're claiming?
Where does data go in a computer when you get rid of it?
It
Completely
doesn't.
Different question.
If you break a computer, the data is no longer there. If you want to get super technical, we can talk about the electronic domains and the little magnets of blah, blah, blah. But if you destroy a computer, the data is gone. You can no longer recover it. If I blow out a candle, the flame is gone. You can no longer recover it. If you destroy a brain, a person is gone. You can no longer recover it.
But their feeling, though, their presence, this like state of them could be
is what
that we're saying that's gone.
It's gone.
Yeah.
Well, how do you say, like the memories of the people that they came in contact with, those are real, right?
Well,
yeah, sure. Those other people's memories are real, and then when they die, those memories are gone.
Right.
It's like saying if I take a picture of you, and then I have this photo, and if I burn the photograph, where did you go?
It's just like, okay, like, you know how we have this cloud thing where all our data goes, right? Well, what is the data? What is data? What is data? Like, what is that? If I have 1,000 pictures on a thing, it's not the same whether I have like 1,000 physical copies of a picture, right?
It's the exact same.
Have 1,000. Yeah.
We call no, but is
yeah,
it?
If you copy a picture 1,000 times, you have 1,000 copies of it. 1,000 individual.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's on a computer or whatever. Like computers are physical things. The cloud is not an ethereal The cloud is just the word that we give for a bunch of literal physical servers that actually have more.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's how a hard drive works. It's just switching these little domains.
Data, right?
Yeah, and if you destroy that hard drive, the data's gone.
And if you put those, but if you put those all that terabytes on pieces of paper, it would probably fill up warehouses.
So what?
Space, right?
I don't see what you're wandering from point to point to point, and you seem to be missing ours, which is that once you're dead.
No, what I'm saying is, if you destroy the data, where does that data go?
It's gone. It stops existing.
It doesn't. It isn't a thing anymore, man.
That's the whole point.
Matter can't be created or destroyed, but it can change forms. So, this group of atoms here in the shape of a microphone, if I were to change them into a different shape, they would not be a microphone anymore. It wouldn't be a thing. It's the same thing with data. It's the same thing with memories. It's the same thing with people. Same with everything. If you destroy it, it is destroyed. Period.
And he dropped.
I'm sorry you had a bad dream, Jay.
Yeah, same here. All right. I think we got time for one more if we can make it quick.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's take a Jay in Missouri who wants to talk about biblical accuracy.
Got another
Jay. We don't have a lot of time. Hit it.
All right. Yeah, I got one question though. You said matter can't be created. Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's the first law of thermodynamics. Is energy, matter cannot be created or destroyed. Yeah.
So when evolution started, that wasn't created. That wasn't created.
No, evolution has nothing to do with the creation of matter. Evolution is how life changes through reproduction.
And evolution is a theory, correct?
Yes, just like gravity, plate tectonics, atoms, cells, and germs. Yes.
Okay. Have they tried to create this Big Bang Theory before?
I don't understand what you mean. Create a Big Bang Theory? What do you mean?
Yeah, haven't they tried to reproduce, just to do the same thing multiple times and failed?
They have tried to replicate. They have tried to replicate abiogenesis, which is the beginning of life from non-life, and we have a tremendous amount of evidence for that. The Big Bang has never been tried to be recreated. That wouldn't make any sense, but we do have a tremendous amount of evidence for that as well.
So non-life cannot come from. You can't make a rock turn into a living human being, correct?
No, and no one's arguing that you can.
No, actually, you are. What is your what is your people that
abiogenesis does not say that life comes from a rock. That is not what abiogenesis says.
So what is your version of the Big Bang Theory?
I don't have a version of it. My understanding of the Big Bang Theory is what the evidence shows, that about 13.8 billion years ago, all matter and space were condensed down into a singularity, into a tiny, tiny, tiny point. And when that started expanding, that was also the beginning of time. That's why I really hate the term Big Bang Theory, because it gives this ridiculous idea of like an explosion in space from which all life sprung. I much prefer the word everywhere stretch, because it's a lot more simplistic and it makes a lot more sense.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with what Einstein's theory of relativity was?
Absolutely. Einstein's theory of relativity, both special and general, play a huge part in our understanding of the Big Bang. Yes.
Okay, but you've never seen life come from non-life, correct?
No, I've never seen that happen, but I have seen a tremendous amount of evidence showing that it is possible.
So you have blind faith saying that non-life can come from non-life.
No, we have.
You didn't hear the part that I just said about how I have a tremendous amount of evidence showing that it's possible.
No, you did. You just said non-life can't come from life. Non-life can't come to life.
I never said that.
Correct?
I said that matter
we've
can't be
never
created
said
or
that.
destroyed.
Same thing. Same thing.
No, how is that not the same thing?
No.
You said non-life can't make life. That would mean matter becoming living matter. I never said that matter can be created from nothing. I never said that matter can be destroyed. I said that matter that isn't alive can become matter that is alive, because that's what the evidence leads me to understand.
What evidence is that?
Well, for starters, the Urey-Miller experience, probably the most famous one. A couple of biochemists from here in America, Stanley Urey and Harold Miller, back in the 1950s, took all of the chemicals you expect to find on a fledgling planet, things that you would expect to find on any, early planet, put them in a jar, got them hot, got them cold, zapped them with electricity over and over and over in order to simulate natural weather patterns. And these chemicals, these simple inorganic molecules, self-assembled into complex organic molecules like amino acids. So this is showing chemical evolution, the chemicals of life forming by themselves. Not to mention the fact that we find amino acids on asteroids in space.
Well, they were forming with created different gases and different amoebas or whatever. I don't know exactly.
They were forming from gases and chemicals that we find literally everywhere all over the universe, undergoing very natural processes under remarkably mundane conditions.
Where did they come from?
In that experiment, or where did the chemicals come from that made life?
Where did the gases come from? Where did the things that they used to make the electricity, where did that come from?
So if you're talking about what the experiment itself was trying to recreate, they were recreating natural processes that you find here on the Earth.
Where did it come from, bud?
Electricity comes from ions in the clouds, atoms rubbing together and exchanging electrons. That's where electricity comes from in the sky, and that's what they were using to simulate electricity.
Yeah, nothing created these gases, and nothing created the instruments that these scientists use to make electricity.
The only people who use the word nothing in regards to the universe coming into being are theists. I have never heard a scientist refer to nothing, except for Lawrence Krauss when he was trying to explain what nothing might possibly be. and how you could get as close to nothing as possible, and you'd still have the quantum foam running around loose.
And he's also a cosmologist, so that's his whole job, is to explain that. Yeah, so it's very, very different.
So, yeah, and so at no point can you claim that either Forrest or myself or any scientists I've ever heard of say that something came from nothing, because that is, I can't find a scientist who's, except for Lawrence Krauss, who's really willing to define exactly what nothing could possibly be. So we don't even know what nothing is. So stop using the word nothing, because you're not getting anywhere, and you're failing to understand us because you're stuck on it.
Created the world. Nothing created intelligent minds, and nothing created the atmosphere. Nothing created the trees that clean the carbon dioxide.
Hold on, you've got several different things here. You've got several different things you just said. Gravity created the Earth, and the atmosphere was held on by the magnetosphere, which is also a part of that whole gravity thing, because these heavier elements like iron and nickel sank to the core and made a liquid core that's producing a magnetosphere. Trees are the results of evolution. They've been around since the Carboniferous period. Like we have evidence for all of these things. It's not like they all just poofed into existence. This is a long process that obeys very, very basic laws of chemistry and physics. It's not magic.
But you've never seen it, correct? Happen before, right?
So just really quick, if you go to a murder trial, do you say, I never saw him murder anybody, so I guess I can't convict him? Or do you say, hey, this is what the evidence suggests, this is what I'm going to go with?
But you've never seen a monkey turn into a human being. But
answer the question. Answer the question.
So answer what I just said, please. If you're on trial for murder, do you expect the people to say, I never saw him commit murder, so I don't care? Or do you expect them to say, here's the evidence, he was in the right place at the right time, we have video camera footage, we have footprints, we have motive, whatever, so this is our conclusion?
Right. And you have never seen a amoeba turn into a fish, correct?
So again, do you have to watch someone murder somebody to convict them of murder, or can you use evidence?
You've never seen it. You've never seen it.
I'm going to say it again. We're going to answer this question if it kills you, dude. If you're trying someone for murder, do you have to watch them murder somebody, or can you use the evidence to convict them?
What is the evidence? I just want.
That's what I'm asking. Do you have to watch a murder happen to know that it happened, or can you go off of evidence to know that it happened? How do you expect a criminal trial to work?
What is the evidence an amoeba turned into a fish?
I'm not going to move on until you answer the question. If you are on a murder trial, do you use evidence, or do you just say, I never saw it?
Yes. Give me the evidence.
So you agree that I don't have to watch an amoeba turn into a person. I just need evidence, right?
Oh, what is the evidence? That's all I want to know.
Yes or no? Do you agree that we don't have to watch evolution happen? We just need evidence.
Third time I said, give me the evidence.
You keep saying, give me the evidence. I'm not convinced that if I give you the evidence, you're going to say anything besides you didn't watch it happen.
Fourth time I said, give me the evidence.
Dude, I'm asking you a direct question. Would you accept evidence or not? And then I will happily start talking about it.
Fourth time, yes, I would. Yes.
Okay, excellent. Great. That's all I needed. So now that we agree that evidence works is important, here's some of the evidence that we have. First of all, like I said a minute ago, we found amino acids, building blocks of living tissue on asteroids in space. Okay, these things clearly form by natural processes. So we can put to bed, excuse me, you asked me for evidence. I am giving it to you. Okay, clearly complex organic molecules that are necessary for creating life can form by natural processes. And clearly those complex organic molecules do the exact same things that they do inside of a living organism by obeying the most basic laws of chemistry and physics. We can do this in a jar, in a laboratory. We can do all of this, okay? So we now see that these chemicals can come from very humble beginnings. We now see that they can do really complicated things all on their own. While we have never watched these chemicals magically just turn into a living thing, we don't have to, because we've seen all the steps along the way except for that one. Now, as far as evolution is concerned specifically, because that is my specialty, We have actually observed evolution. Yes, number one. We also have several lines of evidence, not limited to the fossil record, where we can literally watch these fossil organisms change from simple forms to more complex forms. We have embryology, where we can watch these things, go through these same motions. We have genetic records, where we can build phylogenetic trees based on the genetics that different organisms have. We have several lines of evidence that all point to the same answer. So even if we couldn't watch evolution happen, which we can, we would still have more than enough evidence to understand that it happened. And as far as like how planets and things form like that, that's all astrobiology, and that's not difficult either.
Okay. Let me ask you one more question. Simple question.
Yeah.
How would you feel if you was wrong and you led all the people you're listening to burning hell? How would you feel?
That's an amazing question. I'm genuinely glad that you asked it. First of all, me personally, I would feel good about the fact that I taught the truth as best as I understood the truth, and I wasn't led astray or convinced by threats of burning hell. And that brings me to the second thing. Even if you could prove to me, proof positive, that your God was real and that this hell was real, I would still be right here saying that you have no good reason to worship such a monster that would torture people for just not believing in him. That's an awful, evil thing to do, and I would never want to be subject to a God like that.
Hey, you know what? I guarantee you one thing: we will find out, and I guarantee you this.
Yeah, the famous last words of every theist who loses an argument with us is, "We'll all find out in hell." And you still haven't proven hell, so you have a good Sunday, and we'll talk to you later, Jay. Have fun. Bye. Well, that wraps up this episode of Atheist Experience. Some really, really good calls, and one last final contentious one.
It was a fun one, man.
Yeah. So,
I am glad that we got that in there, because that really is the crux of the argument, is do what I say or I'll hurt you. I love my fiance so much that if I thought she didn't love me back, I'd lock her in the basement and set her on fire. Isn't that sweet? Isn't that a loving, kind, glorious? Oh, aren't I darling?
Unconditional love, yeah. Love me, or
that's what it's all about.
Yeah, it's all unconditional, yeah. Then there's the whole, Jesus saying, "Eat me," and some people taking it a little too literally. So,
absolutely.
All right, Forrest. So, where can everybody find you?
If you want to go to valkailabs.com, you can find all my socials and whatnot there. I have a following on TikTok that I love very much. I'm posting there as much as I can, but I also have some YouTube videos that I'm trying to pour a little bit more time and effort into. So go check me out there as well. That really means a lot to me if you do that.
All right. Well, thanks to the crew and everybody listening and watching. Thank you so much for doing so. And we will see you next time right here on
Bye-bye,
the
guys.
Atheist Experience. Bye-bye.
What will it take for you to start opening your eyes, to start questioning the bullshit everyone around you buys? You think it's any of your business what goes on between my thighs? I wonder when we'll be rid of your lies.
It's time to get sexy, so watch Secular Sexuality live Thursdays at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTSS and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callsex.